The outgoing administration of President Muhammadu Buhari will be handing over on May the 31st a total debt portfolio of about $103 billion. That's roughly 50 trillion naira, the highest in the country's 62 years history. So what will this huge debt burden mean for the incoming president-elect, Senator Bola Ahmed Tinubu, as well as the 36 states of the Federation and his team? I'm chatting to this and a few other questions around it with a policy analyst and senior economist at SPM Professionals, Paul Alaje. Thanks for coming through tonight live into the studios. We've got a whole lot of issues to deal with as a country. But again, when you put them, folks talk about electricity, water, roads, and insecurity and all of that. At the top of it, for me, is the issue of debt. So I just go quickly, piggyback a bit back to 2003, 2005, when the Obasanjo's administration came in, and we were just talking about $18 billion of Paris Club debt. $18 billion about 20-something years ago. And today we're talking about $103 billion, and we're not done yet. What's your take?
Well, I have a lot of worries, I have a lot of concerns, because even the figure declared is not the money we are owing as of today. As of today, when you had Ways and Means that the Debt Management Office had written National Assembly to consider, we're speaking of over 75 trillion naira. When you convert that in the dollars, you know we have even more things to deal with. Debt is not really the concern. The real concern is how do you service it? What is the cost of debt? Because the cost of debt is directly opposite of what is happening.
And I'm going to go straight and disagree with you. Because debt is always an issue.
Yes, that's where I'm going. When I say the debt, just mentioning the word debt is not the issue. It's the cost of debt. That is, even if you say you will pay back in 10 years and 15 years' time, how do you service it with the limited revenue today? Which is a big issue you have now in the short term compared to the headache you will have in the long term. So debt, although people see it as a big issue, which whether or not it is, but the biggest issue that comes with that is the cost of service. So when you look at Ways and Means, it is NPR plus 3. The last NPR increased NPR by, I think, 50 basis points. When you have 3%, you know that we are saying in the next 3 years, we are looking at over 5 trillion added to what we have already from Ways and Means. So when you have that, which of course the National Assembly has not approved, but government has already collected and there is nothing we can do about it, we know we have a big issue in our hand as a country and a big burden for the next coming president-elect.
That's the issue with whether any idea of how the incoming administration should deal with this major problem, $103 billion and counting.
Well, I think the next president, we need to start conversation with whosoever we are owing. There are some conversations that will be very tough, I must warn, because we are owing commercial debt. They are not institutional debt like what we have under President Obasanjo, where we have IMF and World Bank and you Paris Club, I beg your pardon, you can start talking to them. But how do I talk to people, that individual organization, individual person that bought into bonds? It's going to be very difficult. And when you look at the local component of people that have lent to government through the central bank in the name of buying a year or 2 years or 5 years bond, it's really going to be a tough conversation, apart from those that we are even owing that are outside Nigeria.
The type of conversation that Ghana had earlier this year in terms of local debt restructuring. And that's hurting a number of banks, including some Nigerian banks that have exposure to Ghana. The likes of Zenith Bank, the likes of GT Bank. They're taking hundreds of billions of naira right now in the heat because of what's happening next door.
Yeah, so if government is looking at that, the real solution to this is revenue. If you can boost revenue significantly, and I must also warn, you cannot say you want to generate revenue to withdraw effect. When it gets to a point where businesses are suffering and people are suffering, then you throw more people into poverty, which is not the goal of government. But what should we do? You need to look at the books released by National Bureau of Statistics on the economic performance on quarterly basis and look at which sector of the economy is growing. Are they paying revenue to government in the right proportion? I can tell you about 3 or 4 of them, but I will not want to mention the particular sector so that there is no creation of fear in those sectors on this program. But I can tell you about 3 or 4 of them that are paying lower than 20% of what should go to the covers of government. But when you check the National Bureau of Statistics, even during COVID, this sector continued to grow. In fact, one grew by over 7% during COVID. And after COVID, the nature of human and the way we live has completely changed. This sector continue to make more revenue, but I'm afraid, how will our government even understand? And that is why it's important that the next team that will run the economy must understand not just how traditional economy works, but the modern economy, how it works. Because most countries of the world, when you look at what they do, the way we do business is different. The way we are doing business is completely different from the way some of the countries that have gotten economic prosperity and have been able to get this economy to a large extent. When
I listen to other political economic leaders in other climes, the word revenue is hardly mentioned. They mention the word economy. Now, what's this fixation about revenue in Nigeria? Yes, well, everybody's just going to generate revenue. But again, revenue sounds more like we're still going to run this country more from the public sector, government side of things, rather than allowing the private sector to lead it. The private sector leads the economy. The government looks like generating revenue through customs, FIRS, NIMASA, airports, whatever.
Let me give you an example with one of the countries that leads in terms of economy. The size of the economy is almost the size of Nigeria's economy, but the population of Nigeria is over 200 million. Their population is barely 10 million. So everybody in the country is wealthy, not because they generate more in GDP than us, but because they were able to control their population to be less than 5% of our population.
Control population or do wealth creation in the way the economy runs.
So this is what they've done. They've created wealth for that limited population. For instance, if you want to start any business, it starts with business registration. This country has so perfected it that business registration is not managed by government officials. It is managed by business people, and they are given targets regarding business you want to register. So per registration of business, private sector has certain interests and knows that you cannot come register business you are not going to use. So
civil servants are not the one doing business registration for a businessman.
Yes. It's not civil servant, it is purely private sector driven. So there is certain amount that is generated and it's based on target. So before you wake up and before you stand up and say you want to go register business, you had better mean what you want to do. Business failure rates reduce significantly because it comes with a fee. If you take what they generate in a population of 10 million compared to what we generate in a population of over 200 million, if you convert using exchange rate of official rate, they are making over 1.5 trillion naira in revenue to government. Even though it's private sector, the share of revenue that goes to government is over 1.5 trillion. How will such economy not be wealthy? How will people not be wealthy? And government is deploying such money back into infrastructure, human capital development, and so on and so forth. That is why such economy understand how economy runs. It is not just by having papers and having so much number. It's in the quality of businesses they have, and it's in the strength of businesses that the economy is growing. And that is why innovation for me, when we say business innovation, is not just for us to have skyscrapers like the rest of the world. Even had the kind of businesses we have, are they strong? Are they empowered? If we want to have small businesses, it's understandable. We must provide support for small businesses. But when it comes to medium scale and large scale businesses we have, what kind of structure do we have to run these businesses?
I'm trying to find out, how is the new president-elect from June the 1st deal with the issue of debts? That to me, do you think we'll need to go have talks with the powers that be, the bilateral, the multilateral agencies?
I think that would be the first thing.
To China. Do you think President-elect Senator Bola Ahmed Tinubu should be the first to go on debt restructuring, debt forgiveness, whatever it is? Should that be first?
I think the President-elect Senator Bola Ahmed Tinubu will need to have these conversations. They are tough conversations. I will also need to put his bet on ground regarding having more money in the covers of government. Because when you look at what is happening even beyond federal government, in the state government, virtually all the states in Nigeria.
That's about my next question about the subnationals. I can see a number of folks who are just being elected and just asking
It's a hot seat now.
It's a hot seat.
It's a hot seat.
So,
you know why?
So votes are gone. Campaigns are gone.
Yes.
Reality is setting in.
Yes.
So they are scared that they could most likely meet empty coffers by the time they take office.
They are not meeting empty covers. They are meeting negative covers. Because I must tell you that all the 36 states of the Federation are currently above their borrowing limits. And these are not my word, according to the according to Debt Management Office.
So there's no speed limit.
There is no. So everybody has gone beyond. Now, and when you go beyond, what does it mean in economics? It means that the burden of service, I go back to service, monies that should have been available to take care of your people, to reduce poverty, to reduce hunger, to put infrastructure, to empower, to build.
But some of the state governments will argue with you that they've borrowed to build infrastructure, bridges, flyovers, a nice-looking, sexy roundabout.
Apart from Lagos State and 4 other states, which of the states can we say that they have capacity to maintain this debt? So even though you want to do a fantastic business, you brought a business plan and we can see that you are starting the business, but we want to see, are you able to pay salaries recurrent? Are you able to pay salaries regularly so that your staff could keep working?
I know you're going to pay salaries, but then you pay salaries to perhaps public and civil servants who are not generating as much to the GDP.
I use that example to say that even though they borrowed and they claim we are using it to build infrastructure, state government must become innovative. They are losing revenue worth 20 trillion naira every year because of competence in collection, because of who is running it. Civil servants are those running it, and they don't have competence in running it.
Who are they collecting these taxes from? I can see now factories and industries manufacturing in place.
So those ones will not come. But there are businesses that are running in Nigeria today that are returning trillions of naira from states. Unfortunately, states are not aware, unfortunately, that these monies are leaving them. Unfortunately, from investigation that we have done and the work we have done with the state, until states become aware,
have some money.
We have potential money. Unfortunately, in economics, potential don't bring economic development. It's reality. So potentially, Nigeria is a great country. Potentially, states have over 20 trillion naira revenue that is possible for them to collect. But in reality, the question is, are they collecting as such? The answer is no. National Bureau of Statistics shows that the revenue of states, apart from 5-star states, you may want to say, are the one doing relatively well in terms of revenue. Lagos and 4 other states, Rivers, FCT. The remaining states are underperforming. What do they need? What these states need is to perhaps check some of the revenue sources that they are not currently collecting and perhaps work with private sector to help them in collection. Again, the federal government must show the lead. And I hope that the President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu would really consider how will it rejig our income sources as a nation. And if you jig in income sources, before we get to economy, you see, other countries are able to develop economy because they have built the foundation for economy to stand. They have good infrastructure, they have good internet penetration, they have good roads, they have good electricity supply for energy, even though it is not cheap, but they are available for those that want to do business to get into it. Do we have it in Nigeria? The answer is yes, but it's relatively low. We are rated very poorly, and you can check global rating in terms of electricity, in terms of internet penetration. We are rated very poorly in this, and that is why we really don't have economy in the sense of it. When do we have GDP growth most of the time? And you can check this from 1999. A year before election or the election year, that is where you have growth. Why? Because the real economy revolves around politics. When economy is supposed to grow is when you have a new leader who is able to bring economic policy to drive. Unfortunately, we have gone into recession immediately after election, which means that the leaders that are supposed to bring policies, they really don't have the idea.
So after the elections, business as usual.
Exactly. And unfortunately, rather than business as usual growing, we saw it in 2016, it went down. We saw it again, even though we said it's because of COVID. 2018, 2019, it went down. Again, 2020, it went down. Immediately after major election, rather than economy growing, economics emaciating. Unfortunately, it shows that the real strength we have and what covers what the main strength of our economy is politics. I hope that the incoming president will become more innovative. One thing that you can give to him is that he's a pro-market person. Some of the things he demonstrated in Lagos. I hope that it will not take us long before we see such materialize at the federal level.
Lagos plus 35 others. It's a whole lot of work.
It's a whole lot of work. A whole lot.
Let's see how it goes.
And it's not going to come easy.
Well, we're going to touch base with you again. Thank you so much. Great having you on the show tonight.
Thank you so very much for having me.
Thanks for those perspectives. Paul Alaji is senior economist at SPM Professionals.